open up this call. Appreciate the people who are on and the people who will be getting the recording of this afterwards who've signed up. Before I introduce the three speakers, wonderful speakers that we have today, just a brief thing about the Climate Reality Check Coalition. We've been around really actually for about 10 years now. And the main thing we've been doing is these monthly calls on a whole range of different subjects relating to how we build a much stronger and more effective climate movement, climate justice movement. There's three of us who figure out, based upon input and kind of our best thinking, what would be kind of a relevant subject for each month. Jean Sue, who's on this call from the Center for Biological Diversity. Chandra Farley, who is not on the call yet, from the Partnership for Southern Equity in Georgia. She's a Georgia young woman who's playing a really good role there in that really important state right now. And then myself. Just let people know we do have a Facebook page for the Climate Reality Check Coalition that you can go to Facebook and put that name in, and it'll come up if you want to get a little more connected. This call, we thought that the issue of the tar sands, Bakken, these major pipelines in the Midwest, it was a really timely call, and actually it turned out being a little more timely than we thought with what's happening now with Line 3. And we do expect, by the way, Winona LaDuke, who's been a leader in that fight for years, should be on. She's expected to be on the call. For over a decade, the movement, the climate justice movement, has been fighting to prevent the construction and the use of these major pipelines, Keystone XL, going way back, 10 years ago, that thing started up. The Dakota Access pipeline, Line 3 in Minnesota, Line 5 in Michigan. And they all have faced and continued to face grassroots resistance, legal action, a variety of tactics which have had an impact. Now, with the new Biden-Harris administration coming in, the lay of the land is going to be changing. And so the question is, how do these struggles look right now? What's happening? What's the status of the efforts to stop them, to overturn them? And then how we as a movement can be supportive of these efforts. So I'll introduce now the three presenters. First, Joye Braun. Joye is a member of the Cheyenne River Sioux Tribe and an Indigenous Environmental Network community organizer. She was one of the first people to camp at Standing Rock, and she helped the grassroots members of Standing Rock organize their fight against the Dakota Access pipeline. Well, so we'll persevere. So Joye has definitely persevered through much rougher things than a hack of a Zoom call, and we're glad to have her on this call. Jane Fleming Kleeb is the founder of Bold, Nebraska, formed in 2010 to advance progressive ideas in rural Nebraska, which became the main leader in the state against the proposed Keystone XL pipeline. She's since helped to organize and is president of Bold Alliance, a network of small and mighty groups in rural states working to protect land and water, fighting fossil fuel projects and eminent domain abuse, and working for clean energy solutions. She's chair of the Nebraska Democratic Party and a board member of Our Revolution and Matriarch PAC. And Winona LaDuke is an internationally renowned activist working on issues of sustainable development, renewable energy, and food systems. She lives and works on the White Earth Reservation in northern Minnesota. She's been fighting to prevent the Line 3 tar sands pipeline from being built for 7 years, and she's right in the midst of all of that right now. She's the program director of Honor the Earth, which works nationally and internationally on issues of climate change, renewable energy, and environmental justice. So with that, Joye, please, could you maybe open us up?
Ambete waste you happy, chante waste na pechiuza happy, wambly wekoi in machi happy. I greet you all today with a hearty handshake. It's a good day to fight pipelines, to fight tar sands, to fight these dirty fossil fuels. My Lakota name is Eagle Feather Woman. I'm a member of the Cheyenne River Sioux tribe. And yeah, we've been fighting Keystone XL for, geez, 10 years, right, Jane? 10 years, 11 years, 12 years. Seems like it goes on forever. We call it the zombie pipeline because it just keeps trying to come back. But we will kill it again. We will kill it again. So it's good to see everybody. Don't mind any hackers. They'll get caught. They come around. It's nothing new. I don't know what more, I don't know if you just want me to introduce myself or what.
Yeah, if you could just speak about how you see things right now, what's happening.
Well, so I live on the Cheyenne River Sioux Reservation, which is in the north central part of South Dakota. And when Keystone XL originally wanted to do was come straight through our reservation. And we said no, and we chased them out. And the tribe passed resolutions banning TransCanada, now called TC Energy. But at the same time, we also banned Enbridge because we were standing in alliance with our Anishinaabe relatives up in Minnesota fighting on Line 3. And when we started fighting Dakota Access Pipeline, we also banned Energy Transfer Partners from coming onto our reservation. So it's really important that as tribal nations, that we work together with our non-native relatives who also love our land just as much as we do. And we do talk about land back, and we do talk about tribal sovereignty, but it's also a realization that we have people here that love our land, and we're not going to get rid of our friends and our relatives and all that stuff. So don't let that kind of talk scare you. We just want to work together to make sure that our rights as Americans, our rights as tribal citizens, our rights as Indigenous people are protected. Now, Keystone XL here on the ground is currently putting in what we call man camps. The largest is expected to be about 1,400 people, and that's out by Phillips, South Dakota. And there have been actions at the man camp. People have done actions at the man camp. They also are building pump stations. And about 3 or 4 weeks ago, one of our Lakota women warriors, a young girl, well, she's about 22 now, she locked down on the pipe that's being put in the ground at this pump station and was arrested. So there's pipe yards, there's pump stations, and man camps that are being built. Around the Cheyenne River Sioux Reservation right now, we are looking at 3 man camps that are being built right around my reservation. And they're doing this specifically because they know that the Cheyenne River Sioux tribe, the people here from my people, will stand and fight, and we will put our lives on the line if we need to. We certainly hope we don't have to do that. We have a great hope in the new Biden-Harris administration, and especially with Deb Haaland being nominated for the Department of Interior. So that there's a lot of hope there, and I think we have the opportunity to make great strides in stopping this zombie pipeline once and for all. So those are the types of things that we're seeing on the ground. They are avoiding coming through our reservation because they know that they will get stopped. So they try to go around our reservation, but we are definitely being targeted here. They are also building in Montana, and of course they've been building pipe yards and trying to build man camps in Nebraska. Luckily, and Jane can talk more about this, the cities in Nebraska have been standing up, and the citizens in Nebraska have been standing up and saying, no, we don't want man camps. Because you remember the thing with man camps is they bring a lot of violence. They bring a lot of illegal drugs, and they bring missing and murdered Indigenous women. The huge epidemic of over 5,800 missing and murdered Indigenous women that we know of here in the United States, largely due to oil and gas and other extractive industries, where these men come in and cause this huge amount of devastation into our communities. And they do try to sneak onto our reservation, and they do try to throw their money around or their drugs or whatever it is. One of the things that came out of this COVID is the Cheyenne River Sioux tribe, my tribe, set up checkpoints, health checkpoints. So if you don't have business here on the reservation, you're not coming through. So that has helped a lot. And so that's exercising our sovereignty. And so working in tandem with our relatives and our neighbors, them exercising their rights as United States citizens, as members of as Nebraska citizens or South Dakota citizens or Montana citizens, and us exercising our rights as Indigenous people and working in tandem together, that has really helped build a lot of a lot of things that have come out of Keystone XL. We built alliances, we built friendships, we built just really strong relationships with one another. And so whatever tries to come our way, we're going to stand up and we're going to say no. We're going to say no to these pipelines. We're going to say no to Keystone XL, no to Line 3. And we're still fighting Dakota Access Pipeline. We're still fighting DAPL. So that's kind of the lay of the land right there.
Hey, thanks a lot, Joy. Appreciate it. So Jane, I look forward to hearing from you.
Hi, everyone. So let me just first apologize to Jean, who continues to have to delete people who say are Jane Kleeb. Somehow a link got out that had my name on it. And so various people are chiming in pretending they're me, but they're not. So trust me, like I'm fairly certain my husband can only handle one Jane Kleeb. So as well as my kids. So I wanted to first give just kind of an overview, making sure that everybody knows the Keystone XL pipeline is one of really 5 pipelines that we think that the Biden administration can take immediate action on in their first 100 days. So there's Keystone XL, which starts at the Canadian-Montana border, is proposed to go through Montana, South Dakota, Nebraska, to then link up with the southern leg of Keystone XL, which would then carry tar sands to the export market. So that's one. Line 3 is the other one that's currently being fought in Minnesota and Wisconsin right now. Hopefully Winona LaDuke will get on in a little bit to talk about that fight, or Joy and I can kind of update folks on that fight as well. Then there's the Jordan Cove pipeline out in Oregon that the landowners and tribal allies, climate advocates have done a really great job keeping that at bay, but is certainly at risk of coming through. And then there's, of course, DAPL, which is a pipeline that, yes, is in the ground, but got in the ground illegally. So we think that those water permits could be revoked. And then there's Mountain Valley Pipeline. The Atlantic Coast Pipeline in Virginia, West Virginia, kind of North Carolina area did get canceled. So that's very good news. But it's like, bad cousin Mountain Valley Pipeline is still on the table for being built, and it's being built in certain areas. But all of those pipelines have permits that were either granted in illegal ways, meaning out of the norm of operation of a proper environmental review or proper tribal consultation, or using eminent domain for private gain when it shouldn't have been used, or the pipelines just aren't being built yet. Keystone XL loves to say that they're, building, and they do all of this kind of shell game in order to tell the governments, we're building, the pipeline's already being constructed, so there's no use in trying to reverse the permits because we'll just sue you. When the reality is they're just kind of moving pipe from pipe yard to pipe yard, or they're continuing to go to communities saying, we want to build a man camp, we want to build an RV camp, we need to build a contractor yard is kind of their new shtick that they're going to communities with. And this is all because TransCanada in particular for Keystone XL knows the writing on the wall. They know that they don't have the money to finance this pipeline on their own. They had to get a bailout from Justin Trudeau, who pretends he's a climate champion, but yet still grants permits for pipelines. And that's lesson number 1 for Democrats, Republicans, conservatives, progressives. You can't say you're a climate champion and then turn around and support pipeline construction. I don't care how many jobs or how many economic benefits that it's going to bring. If you believe in climate change, you have to also believe that we have enough pipelines to meet our current energy needs. And it's now time to transition to clean energy with everybody at the table on how those jobs and land is going to be used moving forward with clean energy. So TransCanada is doing this shell game right now, pretending that they're doing quote unquote construction. So they're clearing some trees and this kind of thing, because they know that it's 99.9% sure that Biden is going to reverse their permit. And they want to be able to prove economic hurt and damage, so they can sue American taxpayers in the NAFTA NAFTA court system. That's what they did under Obama, and that lawsuit was moving forward. It's kind of a secret court system. It's why some of those international trade deals have very bad components to them. And they'll sue American taxpayers, so all of us on the phone, for $8 billion, $11 billion, $12 billion. So not only do we need to make sure that all of those pipelines that I mentioned, their permits get revoked by Biden, we need to make sure that a climate test is put in then for any future fossil fuel projects. And we need to make sure that NAFTA court systems start to get changed so fossil fuel companies can't continue to profit off of the backs of American citizens, when we should be focused on investing in union jobs for clean energy and making sure that rural communities and tribal nations are at the table in deciding where that clean energy is getting built and who is building wealth as that clean energy is being built.
Well, thank you, Jane. Thank you, Joy. We've actually been trying to reach Winona. She's maybe out there doing what she does, leading the fight, and we will see if we can get her. We're trying, but in the meantime, I think Jean, you'll be kind of taking over now and doing some Q&A, leading some Q&A.
Yes, absolutely. So thank you, Jane and Joy. That was, you two are two big sheroes for me. So thank you for your incredible work throughout all these years. We are going to open this up for Q&A right now. I hope that Chandra and I have blocked all of the, the bombers here. But just in case we end up picking one, apologies in advance. So this is what we're gonna do. If you have a question for Joy or Jane or anyone, please just raise your hand. There's a little raise hand button at the bottom, or you can just say hand in the chat. And we're actually going to have you come on. So kind of elevate you to a panelist so everybody can see your face and we can converse accordingly. So yeah, don't be shy. Whoever has a question, please let us know right now. Great. Okay, wonderful. And Antonia, here she comes. Not a bomber. Here we go. Great, Antonia, you are now, a panelist. So please go for it.
There I am. Hi. Hi, everyone. This is my first experience with a Zoom call being bombed like that. It's a little unnerving, but thank you all for moving through. I have two questions. The first is, I'm interested in your views on Michael Regan being nominated for EPA, given his support of pipelines in the past, in particular, and more about Deb Haaland and anyone else on the cabinet who you're excited about or not so excited about of the nominees. And then if you could just provide a little bit more detail of how much has been built, if anything, for Keystone, and sort of the level of threat, Joy, so it's sort of like, is it real? Are there going to be man camps? Is it a threat that there's going to be man camps? Like, how much is actual and how much is a threat, and how concerned are you by the threats if they're just threats? And then also line 3, I know we're waiting for Winona, but in case she doesn't make it, sort of how much has been built, where things are with that construction. Thanks.
Well, thank you so much, Antonia. It's good to see your face, and I'm glad that you've joined us today. Line 3, From what I know, they're clearing land and they're starting to put pipe in the ground. They've already built some pump stations. Obviously, pipe yards have been built. And when you talk about pump stations, they think, oh, a pump station, it can't be that big. Pump stations are actually 10 acres. So if you think about how big that really is, that's pretty destructive. Man camps, they've definitely moved man camps into some of the more rural areas in Minnesota and Wisconsin. And that's why you're seeing such a buildup on line 3 along Mississippi, especially because, the water for us is sacred. The Mississippi, the headwaters of the Mississippi, those waters are very sacred to the Anishinaabe, to our relatives there. And Minnesota was traditionally Dakota territory as well. So that's some of my ancient land too. Because Lakota, Dakota, Nakota, we're all one. We're all Ocheti Shakoi, really. When you asked about man camp threats here in South Dakota, yeah, they are here and there are men living in them. And like Jane said, some of them they're calling contractor yards. But there are definitely men there, and they have come from everywhere, from Louisiana, from Texas, from a lot of places, from Oklahoma. They use subcontractors. Some of the same subcontractors that I saw up on the Dakota Access pipeline fight, and some of the same contractors that I saw in LNG fights, the liquid natural gas fights, down in Tacoma and Washington State, as well as Texas. LNG fights are another big fight when it comes to this extractive industry. Liquid natural gas stored in these big towers have to be kept cool. If they're not kept cool, they can become these huge explosions that are like 20, 30 times bigger than Hiroshima. And I'm sorry, but I've been to Hiroshima, and that's really scary to even consider that. So it's definitely a threat when it comes to these man camps. They are here in South Dakota. They are being built in Montana, and like they're trying to get permits in Nebraska, and I'm just so proud of our Nebraska residents for standing up sometimes, man. They're just like awesome. They just keep bulldogging it on, it's awesome. I love it. And then so with our people as well. So, and I'm sorry, I can't remember what the other question was. I'm trying to remember all that.
Well, sorry, I laid out a lot. What are they doing in the man camps if they're not laying pipe yet? So what are they having them do?
So they're doing what they call pre-construction. So they're building these pump stations. Now, remember I said pump stations can be, 10 acres. They're building whatever they want to call pre-construction. So anything that's not actually pipe in the ground, but everything else. So pump stations, man camps, they just these pipe yards, and they have security officers at these pipe yards, and they got these huge chain link fence with razor wire at these things, because they're scared of what happened at Standing Rock, right? But remember, all the violence that happened at Standing Rock was because of militarized police and the National Guard. And I was there from day one, and I was there until we got evicted out of there. And that was really scary to go up against these people that were shooting rubber bullets at us and tear gas. I hope nobody ever has to taste what tear gas tastes like, and being pepper sprayed, which isn't these little pepper spray. They look like these big canisters, and you get pepper sprayed and stuff. And yeah, I hope nobody ever has to do that. And that's why I have such great hope when it comes to the Biden-Harris administration. Well, okay, so there was feedback there. But when it comes to like Deb Holland being nominated, that's really powerful. So when it comes to Indigenous people being in any kind of presidential or any kind of cabinet work, we've had one vice president that was Indigenous. That was back in 1933. And now we have Deb Haaland that has been nominated. So this is a huge deal. She's going to still have to deal with the internal systemic racism that is very prevalent in Washington, D.C. But she's a strong person, man. She's powerful. She comes, when you listen to her story about being homeless and being a single mom and wanting to make change and all the things that she has done, she came to Standing Rock and she cooked for us. I mean, that's powerful there. And we always said that the fires that we had at Standing Rock, we sent out to the world, and there would come a point in time when we would need to relight those fires. Well, now's the time to relight those fires so we can stop all this ugliness that has been released, so we can start healing and start changing the world, and we can do it. We can make a difference in the world. So now we need to relight the fires of Ocheti Shakoi for the entire world. It's Mini Witoni, water is life. We need sky protectors to protect the air, and we need land defenders, and we need to stop this stupid eminent domain that tries to come onto people's land and take it away from them and try to step over tribal sovereignty. We can do it. I know we can.
If I can just jump in, I feel like Joy and I maybe were separated at birth in some form or life. We, have been in this fight now for a decade together. We are tough women who often in climate movements, not anymore, but when this fight first started 10 years ago, the climate movement was mostly led by men and mostly white men. And there's a lot of Indigenous leaders now in the climate movement, and rural leaders and communities of color really being in the front lines and in leadership positions and getting funding finally. So, we owe a lot to leaders like Ted, leaders like Bill McKibben, who really elevated a lot of our voices when they knew that we were on the front lines doing everything we could to protect the land and water. As far as when it goes to, EPA appointment of Reagan, I think there's a couple of things. One, he obviously knows the impact on water and environmental pollution from corporations, right? The coal ash is something that he fought in North Carolina. So for me, we have to connect to him and really show the faces and let him hear the voices directly from people up in Canada who are at the source of the tar sands. And, if you want to talk about, tailing ponds of the tar sands, it's just as bad, probably worse, of the ponds of coal ash that were polluting water in North Carolina. So I think that's how we have to help connect the dots. I think sometimes when people support pipelines, and there's a lot of, quote unquote, good Democrats, right, that support pipelines still. And it's because they're not aware of the real environmental risks that go on with pipelines. And they have bought into the line that pipelines are safer than rail, which is of course nonsense. You could say one is riskier than the other, depending on what data you want to, cherry pick from, but both carry risks. And both are unnecessary as we're transitioning to clean energy. So I think that's going to be key with him and anybody else who we need to educate. But fortunately, Deb Haaland, Jennifer Granholm, even Mayor Pete, have all really been with us on issues like Keystone XL and Dakota Access. So now we have to make sure that their voices don't get drowned out by those others in the administration that might not have been with us over the last 10 years, and make sure that they're the voices when they're around that room with Vice President Biden and Kamala Harris that win out, not the kind of handful of kind of corporate folks that are in the administration as well. So that will be key. And the only way that they'll be able to do that is if we are just as loud as we were with President Obama. There's no way that he would have rejected Keystone XL and really tried to step in, at least on Dakota Access. Obviously, we think he could have stood in more, but he did step in those waning days. If he wouldn't have unless we were all getting arrested in front of the White House and putting up teepees on the National Mall and riding horses through the streets of Washington, D.C. and all the actions that we did back home in South Dakota, Montana, and Nebraska. So that's going to be key. We can't think, well, we need to be quiet because everything is so chaotic and we just need some peace. No, the way that we actually get change is to keep the pressure up and make sure that our voices finally are the ones being heard at the table.
And that truly is key right there. So up until inauguration, we need to keep the pressure up. And for at least 100 days afterwards, we need to keep the pressure up, and we need to be loud, and we need to stand up, and we need to say we need free, prior, informed consent when it comes to tribal nations. We need to say we need the climate test for any new projects that are going to be coming on board. We need to educate people that like Line 3 is adding like 50 coal plants. We don't need that type of carbon. You know, Keystone XL, Jordan Cove, we don't need that. We are in a climate emergency. We don't need change by 2050. We need it sooner than even 2030. And we need to start listening to Indigenous people and people whose lives depend on the land and water. We need to listen to these people. And I just hope everybody joins us and you know, stand up against, you know, the insurers like Liberty Mutual, stand up against Chase Bank, which is one of the biggest financial companies that push money into these things. So help us stand up. You guys have so much power. Really, honestly, you really have. You know, it was teepee at the access. Everybody thought I was. Everybody came very long before I had 10.
Uh-oh, sorry, Joy. I think we might have just lost you at the end there. Okay. Great. So Antonia, so great to see you in person, and thanks for the question. Okay, bye.
Thank you all.
Thanks so much, Joy. I hope that we get you back. I'm Chandra Farley. I'm one of the steering committee members for Climate Reality Check, and really honored to be here with Joy and Jane to learn more about this incredible work. And I also really appreciate both of you all's opinions on these recent taps, particularly on Michael Reagan. Obviously lots of news flying around about that, as he would be the first Black man, you know, ever to head the EPA. But I've definitely been fielding some feedback from organizers on the ground in North Carolina, and just learning about, you know, the time for visionary leadership, and, you know, just so many considerations. But you're right, it's us who will need to be counted on to hold these folks accountable, no matter who it is. So we've brought Bruce on, and welcome, Bruce, and ready for your question.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, much
Okay.
better.
I was wondering if any of you or all of you could talk about coordination with Canadians, maybe because I don't know if there's any pipelines as a source coming with Mexicans as well. How this may broadly fit into redoing the way we do trade, impacts on labor and the environment. And something that comes to mind in the back, we got this fracking boom because of a secret advisory group that Cheney had put in that exempted fracking from the Clean Water and the Clean Air Acts. There are still people, even if they are against the pipelines and everything, do not understand the water connection. As much as Native Americans may talk about the pipeline will go through this valuable area and put in danger the water, they don't understand it. We have as much drinkable water on the planet, probably less, as there was when human beings first appeared. So it's not something that we can pretend we can play with and we can make new water with. So that whole thing of how we do with large of North Americans and how to manage that is done. Does any of that make sense?
Well, I can definitely say.
Did I say too much?
No, you didn't say too much at all. No, it's great seeing you. And I love, love, love your mustache. So a couple things. One, on water, you know, the old timers in the Keystone XL fight, and this is true for some of the other pipeline fights where these pipelines come very close to water or go through water, like it would for Keystone XL, the Niobrara River, the Ogallala Aquifer, which is obviously a main source of drinking water for not only Nebraska, but surrounding states. The old timers really believe that, sure, this pipeline might be for tar sands today, but 20 years from now, it will be for water, and that they specifically chose this route and have chose other routes. You could look at Line 3 being another clear one that goes through water supply. So they would then have those water rights. Their pipeline would be right directly through the water, either build a pipeline right next to it or clean that pipeline out with their fancy sophistication and start to pump water and sell water. So that is and always has been a concern. The few times that we got TransCanada actually under oath, they would never deny that that was an option on the table. So that's not just a conspiracy theory or our old timers thinking that, but I also know no matter when our old timers or our elders bring up something, I always listen to them because they always end up being right. So that is a concern, no question. I think water is at the highlight of a reason why the unlikely alliance of farmers, ranchers, tribes, and climate advocates really did all come together. It was to protect the water first and foremost, and then to protect our land rights as well, and being able to farm and live on the land. The partnerships with Canada in particular on tar sands pipelines is very strong. I mean, our Canadian allies, they're the ones who really put out the call to us to help them with a lot of these pipeline fights. And so that's been a very strong partnership. I don't think it's been as strong in Mexico. I think that that is an area that we as Americans really have to go down to Mexico, visit with our Mexican allies. There's clearly a lot of strong environmental activism happening in Mexico, but those relationships aren't as strong when it comes to pipelines. And so that's something that we definitely need to work on.
One other thing. You all mentioned the constellation of people who are coming in that give us great hope, but also in that affects the environment, that affects water use, that affects the use of petrochemicals, is the agriculture secretary. And he's the least promising. People have the right to change over time, but his history isn't good. So any thoughts on him?
Yeah, you know, so Secretary Vilsack, on the one hand, in my book, I wrote a book on kind of how Democrats can reach rural Americans. Again, it's called Harvest the Vote. It's behind me. You know, I actually quote Vilsack in a couple parts of that book because he does know how the government has really left behind a lot of our rural communities, including rural communities of color. Sometimes when I say rural, I think folks mostly think kind of white working class folks, but I'm talking about Latinos, African Americans, Native Americans, Asian Americans, who all live in our rural communities in every single state. So Vilsack knows that. I also think that Vilsack is a leader of his time, right? He was brought up in the 80s and 90s, and the farm crisis was certainly a major issue that he faced. But beyond that, I think that we need to make sure that Vilsack is surrounding himself with younger leaders and people that really represent small producers, because the climate implications of agriculture, of the Secretary of Agriculture, can be major. They can do major things to help farmers. They can do major things to give land back to Black, Latino, Native American, and Asian farmers who used to have a lot more land rights than they currently do. So I think that that door is wide open. I don't think that Vilsack is set in his ways. And so I think he's one of those leaders that we have to educate, just like, quite frankly, we had to educate Vice President Biden as well on a lot of these issues, and still do on fracking, right? And he's still not there on fracking. That's going to be a job that we as activists have to do.
Can I mention a potential ally in the House who used to be my state senator, but he's now a member of the Congress. He's not my congressman. That's the way the districts are. And that's Adriano Espaillat. And when he was a brand new state senator, he took a bunch of his constituents, me included, on a fact-finding tour to Dimock, Pennsylvania, which was the core of the fracking at time. People don't understand how extraordinary that is to have a local legislature organize such a group, and not even to do it in district, in state, but to go out of state, get a bus and go and do that. So he's someone who understands, but doesn't have sort of that and took it on very early, prominence over there. So I think there's a broader group, and he's a member of the Progressive Caucus, which of course keeps growing. That's a positive thing.
Yeah.
So just throwing your name out.
We definitely, appreciate and respect Representative Espaillat. Thanks so much, Bruce. We're actually going to move on to Irene. Thank you so much for your question. Thank you. Hi, Irene.
Hello.
Hi.
There are several things on my mind, but I'll start with the one that you all raised about the rural areas. And I've got grades due at midnight tonight, and so I've been busy reading things that students have turned in for the required professional development. And they participated, a number of them, in a seminar about the rural issues. And their responses remind me once again how much people who don't live in rural areas and have never lived in rural areas do not understand them, do not value them. And in fact, I mean, one student almost point blank said, you know, if the rural people had any sense, they'd just pack up and move somewhere. So, which of course I've been told before that the way I should get broadband is to move somewhere. So our rural areas are terribly important for our whole globe. How do we deal with this issue of so many people not understanding that you can't just sacrifice the rural areas?
Yeah, I mean, I'll say a few things, and then Joy, I would love to hear your feedback on this too, because it gets so frustrating when Irene, and I know you know this, when we talk about rural, people normally only think you and I, right? Or even more so, they think actually just farmers and ranchers. And my husband's obviously in the cattle business, and I love all my farmers and ranchers, but in our small towns, there's a lot more than just agriculture happening for jobs and creativity. I think the people's stereotypes of rural is essentially indicative of the hillbilly elegy, right? It's like we're all a bunch of hillbilly, uneducated rednecks that are addicted to drugs and there's no hope. So you might as well, if you want any type of future, you better move out of rural America, right? That's like the leading message in movies and in books that come out of portraying rural America. When you live in rural America, you know that is the absolute opposite. That, of course, our communities deal with drug addiction, just like our urban brothers and sisters communities deal with drug addiction. And there's some gun violence and all the other kind of problems that our communities face, including access to mental health care and access to good hospitals and public schools and grocery stores. But there's also a lot of creativity happening in our small rural towns where we really build like an ecosystem in order to take care of one another. And so for me, the way that we start to bridge these issues is, one, on climate fights, we have to have rural faces and voices talking about these issues. So folks start to see us as not only fighters to protect the land and water, but also people who are delivering solutions, right? On saying that we want to be at the table when the clean energy gets decided, that it's going to be built in our communities, because we know that in our rural communities, we have all the land that is going to be used for wind, solar, and transmission lines. So if we're at the table, that's going to be a much easier process than if we're afterthoughts and not at the table and not part of the wealth building that's going to happen with the clean energy. I also think that we need more field trips. When Bruce was talking about how they took a field trip to visit fracking communities, like, I want AOC to come here, right? I want Ayanna Pressley to come here. I want Rokana to come here, not to see us as zoo animals or, to treat it like, they're like observing the other, but I want them to get their feet on the land and know what we're fighting to protect. And I want them to start seeing people who at first they may think is an uneducated Trump supporter or a racist, and really start to see that sometimes when you look at an old guy in a cowboy hat, sometimes they're the most progressive and hold the most progressive independent values once you start to peel back some of that initial layer. So, and the same goes for us. Like, my farmers and ranchers will tell you that they had so many stereotypes about climate advocates and environmentalists, and that when they would go to Washington, D.C., the little things where they would try new foods that they never tried, like sushi and that kind of thing, but where they would just meet people who live in New York and California and realize that they too aren't, these like radical people who don't like them. So, Joy and I could have approached fighting Keystone XL and bringing an unlikely alliance together by telling everybody they need to go through a diversity training with a whole bunch of flip charts in a room. If we would have done that, it would have been the death knell of our alliance. What we did is we planted corn together. We painted signs together. We put up teepees together. We traveled to DC together. In those moments, that's how you do it. You really start to come together where you're fighting on an issue together in order to protect each other's best interests.
Joy, you want to chime
My
in?
internet is okay. That with living in rural area and all the kids getting on internet to do their homework. Schools here are shut down for online, so everybody's on the internet for that. But rural America, so much diverse, and if you talk to teach other people to live in rural America, to how to make change, they're not going to have their bread. They're not going to have energy band for rural America.
Joy, we're having a little bit of trouble hearing you. Do you want to try to turn off your camera and then speak? But
yeah,
let's try that.
Okay, is that better?
Yes, gorgeous.
Okay, all right.
Sounds like it.
Progress. So you're not going to have some of the resources that you need in that you use every day unless it's for rural America. But there's so much diversity in rural America. If you just look at that, like where I live in South Dakota, you have farmers and ranchers and indigenous tribes, and you have Amish people, and you have just all, and Hutterites. You have all this amazing diversity that happens here in rural America, and that's what builds a lot of strength. I don't know how to teach people that. I'm not a teacher when it comes to teaching students that. The only thing I can do is try to put people's feet in the mud and in the gumbo and say, come join us and let's get dirty together. Because when we're building experiences together, when we're building those relationships, then we build a better world for all people. And that really is the key when it comes to fighting these extractive industries and fighting for a just transition into a new and better world. So I hope that answers some of your questions.
Well, I mean, and I agree with you. Part of the problem is these things aren't routed through those populated areas. And so to date, they don't have a reason to join with us to fight something. They view it as we're giving up something that is less valuable than could be anywhere else. And
well, I think that's one of the lessons of COVID, right? I think honestly that is one of the lessons of this COVID-19, because people are being forced to stay home. People are being forced to do things that are outside of their norm. They're being forced to go to the store, and all of a sudden you don't have what you need at the store. You don't have what you want at the store. It very may well come to the point where you don't have some of the energy that you need, because we're not only dealing with COVID, we're still dealing with level 5 hurricanes that are coming our way. We're dealing with huge storms that are leveling across the globe in ways that have never been seen before. And this is a direct result of climate change. So at some point in your students' lives, they are going to feel that. So the only thing that you can tell them is say, when this happens, remember, we need rural America. We need to, and the truth is that it's not just rural America, it's communities. We need to build communities. We need to get away from these heavy, huge infrastructures that are looming over us, and just move away from that sort of thing and start building our communities better, because that's the only way we're going to survive.
Great. Thank you so much, Irene, for your question. Ted?
Yeah, no, we really want to thank everybody who's participated, especially, of course, Joy and Jane. We were, by the way, trying to reach Winona the whole time, and clearly things are happening up there in Minnesota with the Line 3 battle. Maybe what we can do is we do send out an email after these calls to everybody who's signed on, and for Jane and Joy, if they're particular like links in terms of that you think would be helpful for people to have to help them more fully understand what's going on, or to find out how they can give money to support efforts or to get involved in some way, get those to Jean, and Jean will get those out, as well as the recording of this that will go out to everybody who signed up. So maybe if we could just, Joy and then Jane, do you want to just finish up, take a minute or so? Anything you'd like to add at the end here?
So I'll go first, and then Joy, you'll have the last word, as you should. So if you want to be involved in Keystone XL, boldnebraska.org or boldalliance.org. our two websites. You know, we link to often a lot of our allies, like the Indigenous Environmental Network that Joye works with. And we're actually kicking off in the new year a new project called the Pipeline Fighters Hub, where we will be coordinating with all the other pipeline fights all across the country, as well as in Canada. And thanks to Bruce, I'm thinking about how we're gonna coordinate with our brothers and sisters down in Mexico. But that's going to be a place that you can learn about different pipeline fights, because sometimes it's hard to know where the fights are, which ones are active, which ones are being constructed. So the Pipeline Fighters Hub is going to be meant to be kind of a team coalition view and get resources directly out to the front lines. I will say, because Winona's not on, that Honor the Earth is absolutely the best place to look for information for Line 3. They have a lot of great videos and maps and one-pagers on their website. And then the landowner group up there is called Friends of the Headwaters, and they have a really strong set of lawsuits right now challenging Line 3. So I just wanted to make sure that those resources were put out there too. But Jean and Ted, thank you, for having Joye and I on. I only, got to participate in 2 protests, I think, maybe 3 with Ted, maybe 3, but one of them was in the streets outside of FERC with the big rubber stamp. And Ted is like the grandfather of putting pressure on FERC. And when we get to the day when FERC bans the use of eminent domain and puts in a climate test, it will be because of Ted. So thank you, Ted, for all of your work on that issue.
It'll be Ted and all the other people who Ted works with, like with Beyond Extreme Energy and other groups, not just Ted, for sure. Joye, do you want to finish up here?
Yeah, definitely want to thank you, Ted and Jean, for getting us here and in this conversation. With Line 3, I suggest that people go to welcomewaterprotectors.com. There you're going to find a lot of information about Line 3, what you can do to donate on the different areas along Line 3, what they need on the front lines, where you can go, and just a ton of information if you plan to either go or to help assist on the different camps and the different groups. Definitely be following Ginu Collective with Tara Hauska, and of course Winona LaDuke with Honor the Earth. Just powerful women. I love that there's so many powerful women that are leading these fights in Black, Brown, and of course Indigenous communities and in rural America. I love that the women have stepped up, and with that, there's, like I always say, there's a lot of healing that comes. We do a lot of fighting. We put our hearts and our minds and our bodies on the line, and we do a lot of fighting, but at the same time we do a lot of healing. And like I said before, I have a lot of hope. Definitely go to ienearth.org. I tried to put it in the chat, but for some reason my eye keeps going to a U. I think I need reading glasses. getting to that point. But like I told Jean earlier, I just got out of the hospital yesterday. I have pneumonia, but this was really, really important for me to come on here and just spread the hope and the resources that we need, that we can stop Keystone XL, we can cancel Keystone XL, we can stop Line 3, we can get DAPL out of the ground, we can stop Jordan Cove from trying to come back, because that's what they're trying to do right now. And yeah, we do work a lot with our Canadian relatives up at the tar sands. We do need to work more with our Mexican relatives down in Mexico. A lot of different issues with those things, but this is part of allyship, and this is part of building those relationships, and this is part of being responsible to one another and responsible to the earth that we all love and care about. Wopila.
All right, thank you, Joye. So we defeated Donald Trump. We won that victory, and that was a huge victory. And now we're moving on to start winning even more now on all these different issues. So we really appreciate, again, Joye and Jane and everybody else who's been on this as we keep building a winning movement. We can do this. We can do this now. We have some wins underneath our belt, a really big one, and there's a lot more to come. We just have to keep it going. So we'll be doing another call in January. We don't know yet exactly what it's going to be. If you have any ideas, any of you on the call, let us know, and we look forward to being with you in the future. Thank you.
Great. Take care, everyone, and be safe over the holidays. Bye.
Thanks, everybody. Keep pushing for Georgia. We need all the help we can get.
Absolutely.
I was on the phone 3 evenings this week making calls to Georgia. People should do that.
Thank you, Ted. Thank you. And make sure those folks remember to talk about the Public Service Commission race, not just the Senate race.
I did that,
Yay.
actually.
We're
Yeah.
pro Blackman. Yes.
Daniel Blackman. That's right.
Bye.
Take care, everyone. Bye.